Signature hand clap. Welcome back, guys. This is episode 7, where today Matt and we're going to be discussing returning to training. Obviously, this is going to be really relevant, seeing as the kind of light is at the end of the tunnel, as it were, with the gyms potentially opening up in the coming months, or at least it is here in England. I know Matt, unfortunately, up in the hills, maybe having to look a little bit longer, thanks to Nicola Sturgeon. But nonetheless, we're going to be talking about some of the practical applications of going from home training to training back in our gyms with lots of weight, lots of machinery, or even if you've been at home and you haven't been training at all, and now you're potentially considering doing some home-based training, some of the things that you should take into consideration to basically put you in the best possible position to start making progress. And we're going to talk a lot about recovery, etc. So, Matt, without further ado, how you been, dude? How you been getting on?
Grand, mate, other than Nicola Sturgeon not allowing us to go back to the gym. I'm just going to have to keep using, I've got quite a lot of haggis in the house. I've just been using that.
No, Iron brew post-workout standard.
That's it, Iron brew and haggis. I mean, that's pretty much Scotland. That's it. There's nothing else. Hills, haggis, kilts and Iron brew. I'm good, mate. I'm good. Looking forward to getting back to training. But I think the reality is, like we've just said, it's going to be a lot longer for I than you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, nonetheless, this is still something that people can refer back to, and that's what we want this to be, right? It's just some long form content for people to refer back to for when, inevitably the gyms do open, so that they're in the best position to be efficient with their training. So I guess we should probably start with maybe some of the things that will be of concern for people when they are making that transition back into the gym. So it's not going to be a case of just going straight back in the gym and continuing on with your training prior to lockdown, because that's going to throw up a couple of issues with recovery, soreness, all of that kind of stuff. So what would you say the first thing is that we need to consider when we do get back into our gyms?
For sure, buddy. I think just to reiterate what Ollie said is that although potentially the gyms aren't open yet, especially in Scotland, but even so in England, that as Ollie kind of loosely touched on in that introduction, that even though that's the case, there will be a lot of people who have taken time off through lockdown through a lack of equipment or motivation or whatever. There's a plethora of reasons why you may well not have been training at all, even if just a little bit. You might now find yourself in a bit of a groove and have increased training and kind of be ready to go back to, or you've managed to acquire enough equipment to go back to training more thoroughly and fully at home. So even if this isn't in the context of going back into a gym, there will still be a lot of takeaways in this that you can apply directly to training at home right now to start to get back into a groove and replicate what you're doing in the gym. To answer Ollie's question, what should we be considering when we're going back to the gym? Because the reality is, at least the way I see it, is there will be an influx of people ready to bro split the life out of themselves, straight back into the gym on Monday, beat the life out of chest and biceps. That sounds fantastic, but the problems are vast. And I think the reality is being actually almost putting curtailments on yourself. I think it's going to be the biggest challenge that faces people, and I think it's probably going to be the most beneficial way forward, is curtailing and not assuming that you can go back in where you left off. Because I think that's probably the bottom line of this whole discussion is, before lockdown on March 22nd or whatever it was, when you went to the gym, you were able to lift X. You now can't lift X, or even if you can, you shouldn't, in my opinion. It's now X minus 1 at the very least. So we need to be considering load, we need to be considering volume, we need to be considering recovery as our kind of 3 main sort of pillars of what we're doing here. So for me, considering a significant reduction in the number of working sets that we're doing, potentially considering an increase in the amount of activation that we're doing, because we will have had muscles relatively dormant for a large period of time. There's a lot of people who don't have a mirror fit lat pull down in their garage, who a vertical pull has almost been eradicated in a lot of people's training for the last 8 weeks or more. Because elastic bands are great, but they're not really producing the amount of load that some people are used to pulling when you jam your legs under a lat pull down and go to town. So you got to consider that exercise selection now becomes a problem. And I think just before Ollie and I came on, that's maybe a good place to start. We were discussing exercise selection being one of the sort of core elements that's going to need tweaked with some intelligent planning and prep from a coach, or indeed yourself if you don't have a coach. We need to start to consider what movements should be included and what movements should probably be or potentially be omitted from a returning to training phase. So in my opinion, and I'll leave you to agree or disagree, is we would remove the more complex exercises in favor of simpler, and potentially maybe simpler is the wrong word, more stable.
Yeah, stable.
More stable variations of a movement. So I'll let you give a good example. So why don't you run with that, because it's your example, but before I steal it, because that's shite.
No, mate, you crack on, dude. Take all
Always
the
this, I'm steal it as my own now.
Yeah, no, we were chatting off air, and it was a discussion that I had on socials with a guy who I respect massively, to be fair, and his point was valid as well. And I think there's pros and cons to both approaches. But I was saying, similar to Matt, you know, I think one of the things that we should be considering when we get back in the gym is exercise selection, and just keeping it as simple as we can and keeping it as stable as we can. So, you know, if you had to toss up between a barbell back squat and a leg press, I'd be going for a leg press because it provides more stability and less likelihood for things like injury. And I think we could spend the first few weeks of returning to training, increasing strength, regaining some of those neural adaptations to lifting a particular amount of weight, making sure that we're recovering appropriately. And then we can start to gradually reintroduce these more complex movements that pose their own challenges. When you've kind of regained some strength, you've regained some, you know, some normality with your training. But the argument that this chap had, and like I say, it's a valid point, is with his own clients, he's of the opinion to reintroduce those movements as early as possible so that they can start rebuilding those foundations, start rebuilding those movement patterns as early as possible. And I'm sure you'll agree, Matt, I'm just of the opinion that we could be better served focusing our attention in other areas right now. The complex movements aren't going anywhere. I think we can potentially put ourselves in a better position to undertake those movements down the line by focusing on movements that provide more stability to begin with. I don't know if you kind of have anything to add to that, or agree or disagree with that, dude.
No, I mean, I agree with that. And I also agree with the fact that the bloke that you were chatting to, there's a lot of validity in that. And there will be probably half of the coaches who follow that kind of methodology and ideology. And that's not wrong. It's just that you and I fall into the camp of, I'll go with stability over instability to start with every single time. It's just my ideology and my ethos for coaching. There is an argument for going back to the less stable exercises, but for me, it's just really straightforward. It's risk reward. And the risk of an unstable exercise is outweighs the reward. So yeah, I would go with definitely be focusing on stability. And in fact, stability is, for the most part, when I've got a client who wants to build muscle or indeed wants to lose fat, that's the same thing. Let's be honest. This is the same thing in training, building fat and losing muscle. I'm going to train, if you want to lose fat, I'm going to train you to build muscle. I'm going to train with that intention. With that in mind, stability is my absolute primary focus. It's like my first concern. Is this the most stable exercise or version of that exercise I can give them? If not, what reason have I got to put it in their plan? Because for most people, they're not athletes. They don't need any of that instability thrown in. We don't need to be standing on a Bosu ball squatting. Be my guest, but it's not something I'm going to program.
That's it. I think people get married into movements, and I think people are, for whatever reason, it's maybe just a dogma that's been built up over the years, but they're of the belief that there are particular movements that they simply have to do to get the most out of their training, or to build muscle, or to look a certain way. And the reality is, it's just simply not true. And as you were saying there, the more stability you've got, the more you can kind of standardize your exercise execution, the more you can then overload it, the more you can basically build muscle. So it's removing an element of skill, and that can be really beneficial. Now, don't get me wrong, there are, of course, you know, intermediate to advanced trainees who can really benefit from having those more complex movements in their programming. But for the most part, and for most people watching this, it's just not a massive concern for you right now. So I'm really glad you brought that up, dude. One of the things that you brought up as well that I found really interesting was like the psychological issue that people are going to have of getting back in the gym and almost holding back and putting restraints on themselves. I think that's going to be huge. I think a lot of guys are going to want to go back and just hammer the nail as hard as they can. And probably chucking you a bit of a hot potato here, mate, but what would be your practical recommendations for not facing that issue? So, you know, not going in and killing yourself. What would you say to put in place? Sorry for that.
No, mate, it's good, and I'm prepped for it. I'm good. Thank you for the hot potato. caught and handled. Before I answer it, I'm just going to say that what you were touching on there is Brian.
Yeah.
Actually, you have to squat, bench, and deadlift.
Yeah.
Develop muscle mass. Actually, it's like, yeah, do you though, Brian?
Yeah.
Do you, or are you just being a cunt? It's the first time I've used the C-bomb in one of these. So,
okay, there you go.
I mean, it's took us 7 episodes. If anything, I'm disappointed in myself. So, to answer the question, how would I go about addressing that curtailment? If anything, I think first things first, like, congratulations on being the type of person who wants to go and hammer the nail in with a hammer. Like, there's a lot to be said for that. But, and there's a big but, I think the all or nothing mentality costs people success on a regular, and not just in returning to the gym. I think when we approach it with that all or nothing mentality, it's this, well, if I'm not going to go and absolutely beat the life out of myself in the gym, what's the point? Going and destroying yourself is going to be counterproductive, because you will significantly increase your MRV, so your maximal recoverable volume, and then you're going to end up in bed for several days. But genuinely, not a sales pitch. Could be a sales pitch if you're interested. Kind of a sales pitch. Having a coach and having some accountability, because I know myself, left to my own devices, it's almost like a split personality. I know with this hand, I shouldn't go crazy. On the other hand, chest and arms. So equally well, having a program that's been written for me that kind of takes that like decision-making process away, because I think often it's like it's like you're a child. I'm going to start quoting Arnold here.
Like a child, come on.
But it's not hard for me to give you the wrong advices. Ultimately, you're like a child. You're very excited and ready to get going. Whereas if you've got a coach, it's like, look, Ollie, this is all I need you to do. Go do that. I feel like that takes the decision-making process away. And it's like, a client who struggles with diet, taking choice away from them can quite often drive consistency. So for me, having some accountability, having a program pre-written, that's probably a big one. Even if it's not written by a coach, having a fucking plan, because people are going to get so excited the minute they get that email from the gym. It's like, hey guys, we're open again. And then they're like in the car in their dressing gown, off to go and train. Chill. So a plan, potentially, and probably some accountability. Ultimately, after that, yeah, exactly, call us. What else would I do to make sure that we don't go ham? I'd be considering the style of workout as well. I'd probably change people's split for the large part. Personally, Ollie would probably move to like a 3-day split. Yeah. Just initially. Even if you're used to training 6 days a week. Not now, you're not. Let's reduce total volume. Let's step further away from a bro split, because I think genuinely that's going to be one of the biggest challenges I face as a coach. Yeah. Is everyone like, oh mate, I just want to go back. So I just went back and did shoulders.
What? Yeah.
On delts.
Yeah. But it's going to happen. And, you can forgive people for getting excited and for going in and wanting to take every set as close to failure as possible and beyond failure with drop sets and cluster sets and just all kinds of set intensifiers. But like Matt said, it's going to be really, really impractical for you. It's going to be taking like 1 step forward and 3 steps back, because you are going to be crippled on subsequent sessions. You're not going to be able to perform the way that you want consistently in the early stages of returning to the gym. So I guess my advice would just be, like you said, take a couple of working sets out so that we reduce your total training volume across the week. Potentially change your training split so that you're training less frequently and you've got more rest and recovery between sessions, and just work a little bit, further away from failure than what you potentially normally would, because it's understanding that you're still going to get great adaptation and gains from even doing that small amount. It's still far and above beyond what you've potentially been doing at home. And you have the ability to then progress that over time. And everyone's a winner in the long run. Now, obviously, that's going to be much easier said than done, but that would be my general advice for sure.
Yeah, I think going back to training like this is analogous, like what we're suggesting, and taking some of the working volume out. You could very well increase feeder sets or increase activation exercises if you're really hell-bent on doing a lot and being in the gym for over an hour. I would probably increase activation exercises and really get used to just having a mind-muscle connection with whatever you're doing. And ultimately, though, what we're saying about these first sessions, it doesn't have to be a long time. It could be a couple of weeks of training as a kind of initial microcycle. I think you need to think of them as analogous to the feeder sets that you would do on a big compound in any session. These become like the feeder sessions to serve you into the sessions that you're going to do in a couple of weeks' time. And I think by it's like they're taking one step back to take two steps forward. Because at the moment, people are like, but hold on, I can bench 150. They're great. For me, put like 70 on the bar and just move. Just get back into a groove and just get those movement patterns firing again. Chalk up some time in the gym, get comfortable with it. You will find that largely for a lot of people, just through glycogen alone, you'll feel like you've made gains almost immediately. Yeah. And you know what? From a psychological perspective, that's going to be massive. Even if, I know the trainee knows it's not actually muscle. It's muscle that was there. It's just been flat and empty. You just are fueler now because you're now eating in line with a more intense training regime. You're also now putting more fuel through each muscle. You're now fueler. You've got that kind of, I call it like a gym semi to my clients. So it's like, you've got a bit of blood in it all the time.
Yeah.
Doesn't make you a bad guy.
I was just about to use a penis analogy as well. So we're in sync massively. Mine was going to be like actually just as a general returning to training, like don't view it as like thumbing in a semi into like a dry bum hole, like it's just not going to go well, rather spend time. Is that your face going in? So yeah, I'm glad we're on the same wavelength with comparing our gym sessions to veiny members. So that's good.
You're a bad guy, mate. Give the people what they want. So I think ultimately that for me, to recap that kind of like bit of a blather that we had there, dropping the number of working sets. If you don't want to work on RPE, that's absolutely fine, but considering proximity to failure, that's what, to give you your words back to you, is to consider proximity to failure, pull it back a bit. We don't need to be working to failure. It doesn't mean that working to failure is a bad thing here, but we're given some ideas for people to work with. So drop in RPE, drop in working sets. Don't assume that, again, this is a big point, don't assume that strength hasn't changed. Because it might well have changed. So because you could bench X before or leg press X before doesn't mean you can now, or that indeed you should. In fact, you categorically shouldn't. Certainly, in my opinion. And I think that, like we discussed before we came onto recording, that like in my own experience, probably I don't know how many years ago it would be now, like 6 years ago, maybe more. Excellent video. We should maybe put it somewhere. It's all on video. I broke my elbow and my shoulder and knocked myself out trying to cycle along a wall after somewhere close to 12 pints on a rental bike in Copenhagen at like 2 a.m. With a big clear sign, "Do not cycle along this wall." What's the worst that could happen? Now I'm now down in McCaskill. Not the case. Anyway, broke my arm, broke my elbow, broke my shoulder, my AC joint, just completely smashed myself up, which took a lot of time out of training. So I did a lot of research into this because, like guys watching this or girls, I was panicking about what's the best way to get back into it. And what I discovered at that point was that the neural adaptation actually probably isn't going to regress as quickly as you think. So actually the strength's probably still in there, but going straight back to 100% is retarded.
For want of a better phrase, for sure.
We're doing really well on the mildly offensive anecdote.
I think our demographic allows for it, man. I don't think there's anyone too PC watching, to be fair.
You didn't get to episode 7 and not expect this, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, for me, it's probably still there, but be patient, because what you need to understand is strength is largely a neural component.
Yeah.
It is largely neural, and it will still be there. You will get your initial gains that you lost. None of that is actually fact, probably, back through glycogen repletion. Because for the most part, your guys, my guys, are eating the maintenance now, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
So give them a bit more food, get them back to training. You will probably within a week, I would suggest. I'm expecting clients within a week to be like, mate, I feel massive again.
Yeah, I mean, you got that anecdote. I've got the same. When I did the Ironman a couple of years ago, I obviously lost like 35 pounds or so, just like a completely different person. And I remember taking the picture the day after the Ironman and just thinking, fuck, I've fucked it. I've fucked 15, 16 years worth of resistance training and building my physique. And I just remember I was depressed, man, like proper depressed. And then like literally a couple of weeks, months back in the gym training, and I started to feel like myself again. I was nowhere near where I was, do not get me wrong, but it came back so quickly. And that's an extreme example. Like, not only was I not training, I was also doing upwards of like 12, 13 hours of cardio a week. So it's like a very extreme example. But even then, you know, this is what muscle memory is. You know, you've got myonuclei inside the cell, and it is a satellite cell essentially. And basically, when you lose tissue, you don't lose the myonuclei, you don't lose the satellite cell. And that is your then potential to then regain muscle very quickly, quicker than the first time that you build it. So it's that, like you said perfectly off air, was that comfort blanket of knowing that anything that you did potentially lose during this downtime will be back very, very quickly. And there's no need for you to kind of rush the pan and go in and do all this crazy shit, because you'll be back to normal in no time at all.
Yeah, that's a really important point, is that I think that's the concern. That's the headspace I know I would have been in prior to understanding this. And that's the headspace I know I've got a lot of clients who were in, and the people listening will or watching will be in. And that is that, well, it took me 10 years to build this. I've now lost X percent. It's going to take me another 10 years. It's not.
No.
Is it like weeks or months rather than years now? Because it's all there. And like you said there, like satellite cells and the science of it all, effectively muscles have epigenetic memory. You will get it back much, much faster than you like. Like both Ollie and I have at some stage both resembled Litvinenko in terms of muscle mass. But here we are. I mean, I still resemble him. I have the same amount of muscle as a 5-year-old Asian girl just now. But hey, look, you can't really cry about it. I've just got to go on with it.
You look like you was about to, though.
Mate, that illness, I mean, that's another good example. That illness that I had over Christmas when I got Giardia on my gut just absolutely battered me. Like, I mean, I could have put 6,000 calories in a day, and I was shitting 5,500 down the toilet. So it was completely pointless. So I'm in a position now where, if anything, I'm probably more aggressively lost muscle tissue than a lot of the people who are fretting about it.
Yeah.
I'm of the understanding that with a correctly programmed training cycle and nutrition, we're going to be grand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a cool thing to know, man. It really does put your mind at ease, and we're quite fortunate in that we're coming from that place authentically, like we've been there. So it does kind of put our mind at ease, and obviously knowing the science behind how all this works helps as well. But just take it from us, you're going to be a-okay. I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to touch on in relation to this whole topic. Is there anything you can think of, or?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is just be fucking patient. Like, people are going to want to rush it so quickly. And I think especially dudes, like men are so bad for it. Yeah. Just take your time. Like, just give yourself a month or two just to feel it back out, and you'll be back to where you want to be in like 2 months tops. Yeah. I think just to kind of give a more tangible element to what we were saying about exercise selection, for me, if there's a machine, ideally plate loaded, because generally speaking, the resistance profile of the machine will be better than one of these techno gym shitters with cables. Not all, but I mean, that's a good rule of thumb. For me, if there's a machine that can replace a free weight exercise, initially most of my programming will be done on as much of a plate loading basis as possible, because the stability is significantly higher than dumbbell or barbell. And when the stability is higher, that significantly improves our ability to produce force around a joint and in a muscle. And when that's the case, rather than worrying about falling off a bench, because trust me, one of the things that you will feel a difference in is your like anti-rotational, because you've been doing next to fuck all to prevent that from happening. So when it comes to like dumbbell rows, like unilateral work, or even just getting onto a bench with 2 dumbbells, you're going to feel that core stuff, that all the little stuff that goes on from basically serratus through internal, external, oblique into your abs. All that's going to be a little bit detrained. So you're going to experience less stability. So for me, if we can just get used to some intra-abdominal bracing through machines, we're going to not only increase activation of all those muscles, the sort of deep core muscles, but we're also going to be able to increase the amount of force that we can create into the target muscle. And if that's the case, within a couple of weeks, you'll be able to move back to dumbbell stuff with a lot more confidence. It's also reducing the risk of injury, because in my opinion, it's probably quite high if you're stupid about things.
Yeah, definitely, man, for sure. Yeah, it's being detrained and then getting into heavy load. That's going to be dangerous. But the thing is, and the reality is a lot of guys watching this will just be like, yeah, that sounds great, guys, sounds great. And then, as you say, chest and arms, and I do get it, but you know,
I've done it a few times in the garden where I'm just like, I fucking can't be bothered today. I really don't want to train. And then I go and get the kit and I chuck it all in the garden. I'm like, right, you know what? I genuinely don't want to train. I'm going to do chest and arms and see how I feel. And it's been better than a kick in the face, but I know I'm not doing what I need to do. Well, there's a hot potato question then, so we can put some more tangibility on what we're saying, because at the moment this has been theory rather than application. So if I was your client, and we might have different views, and I'm going to go back to the gym, really shitty question this, mate. What would be the most optimal for most people training split, in your opinion, for a return to the gym? Shite question. Deal with that.
I mean, it's a good question. I think thinking about it, my biggest concern would be recovery between sessions. So having as much time between sessions, but while still accruing enough volume that it's effective, and we're getting enough training frequency that it's effective. So I'd probably still want each muscle group to be targeted twice per week. But within that, I'd like more recovery between sessions. So the way that I'd probably run that personally is maybe like an upper body session, a lower body session, maybe 2 days rest, and then a full body session, days rest, go again. And the full body session would be working further from failure, less intensity in terms of the loading that you're using. So we're using less total weight. So kind of more skill-based training session, working more in those kind of higher hypertrophic ranges. And the upper body and the lower body sessions can be a little bit heavier and a bit closer to failure. That's the way that I would run it, just thinking off the bat. I don't know what you would do, Matt, dude.
Something very similar. If not upper lower full.
Yeah.
Then a push pull legs, potentially push pull legs full. I don't know, something to that effect. Again, like I'm saying, it was a shit question.
No, it's a good. And that's the thing is, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's having understanding behind what you're doing and why, and what your thesis is. Why are you doing that? For me, like, the whole thing's recovery, so that's why I put the split that way. You know.
That's the point. It's just I'm trying to offer something to somebody watching as to, like, right, this has been great, guys, but what the fuck does that mean? So yeah, that's a good answer that you've given. I think the only thing I would tack on, if we're going to say that upper, lower, full, is probably a good 3-session intro back to the gym. For me, with your upper, probably more so with the upper and the lower, I know we're saying maybe work with heavier load. For me, one of the biggest issues, most prevalent issues, and most frequently ignored issues when returning to training would be the trainees' desire to chase a pump. I actually don't have a huge problem with that towards the back end. A wee bit of a pump is going to do a huge deal for the psychology of the trainee. In terms of, for a lot of guys, that's what they're missing. Like, and they're misconstruing it as something else. Get a good either stimulant-free pump formula or a good pre-workout before 2 p.m. and go to town on getting a pump at the end of your session if need be. I don't mean sets and sets and sets and sets. This is not like carte blanche to go crazy and go smashing loads of volume. But if you want to throw in a couple of pump sets at the end just to make you feel better, so you can look at yourself in the mirror and be like,
I feel good.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that gets slammed hard in the industry as like vanity work. But if this isn't a vanity project, then what the fuck is it?
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
So don't be afraid to do maybe an upper lower full, wee bit of volume work at the end if you want to chase a bit of a pump, no problem. And then I'd probably move people towards push pull upper lower as a next, like, phase 1, phase 2 return. That's how I would, phase 1A, phase 1B rather, probably better.
Yeah.
Push pull, upper lower full, push pull upper lower. That's your 4th session when we want to reverse it. But like Ollie touched on, we spoke about it off air, making a huge deal of recovery, as we've sort of talked about in previous episodes, is making sure that you are focusing hard on sleep, focusing hard on supplementation and nutrition around training, and then looking at sensibly not just training 3 days on the bounce, because you will be in absolute bits. Train 3 days a week. I know you want to train 6, and I respect that. Train 3, make sure you got a rest day between them. That's just how I would do it.
Yeah, definitely. It becomes counterproductive after a while, doesn't it? You know, you just keep trying to hammer in the sessions, and it's that's going to be really tough as well for people to physically take time off. You know, the gyms are open and it's rest day. You're going to want to go in and do something. But I think having the discipline there early on will serve you well. Again, going back to kind of forming habits, it's going to be tough for people, but it's just what you need to do, you know, and as long as you know that you need to do it and then you apply yourself to that, that should be enough. And if it's a case of that you really want to get into the gym because you've just been missing your little haven, as it were, then go and stand on a treadmill, do some very light cardio, maybe do some abdominal training or something to that effect. But give yourself the appropriate recovery time for sure.
100%, mate. I agree with that. Like if you want to go to the gym, go do some. I would just get my guys doing some mobility work or something like that.
Yeah.
Just be in the building. I get that. I fully understand that. Just away from life, because that's what a lot of people are missing. It's like when you get old, the gym is golf, right? That's how I understand life. Like when you're our age, you go to the gym for your haven, and then when you get old, apparently, I'm led to believe.
Yeah, I'm still kind of a little bit skeptical about that, to be fair. One of my good mates, Adam, is an avid golf fan, and it just doesn't appeal to me, to be honest. But we shall see.
The most annoying, frustrating game in the whole world, mate. Right, well, I think that probably concludes it.
Yeah.
Don't forget about the recovery part. I know it was tacked on at the end there, but it is huge. So make sure that you're not battering yourself into the ground, because you're going to be throwing in a shitload more sympathetic activity that you've not been used to. And so there needs to be a counterbalance of parasympathetic exercise and time. Some increase your steps. Just fucking move. Spend some time chilling. Yeah?
Epic. Yeah, man.
What's going in the bin? I think we said that dickhead Brian from the gym.
I don't know if we can we do that? I mean, we've already got Brian in the bin.
Not necessarily Brian, but like that attitude of like, well, actually, you have to do bench. Yeah, you know, the big three.
No, that's fair. Yeah, the big three. So he's usually some like morbidly obese dude who wears a fucking lifting belt on everything he does.
So, do you know, I refer to him, this is a great way to round out. So I used to do daily emails, and I was always particularly proud of them. And so that guy was the sausage casserole diet. So
yes, I've read that email, mate.
Too much sausage casserole, right? And like all he says, he's usually wearing a lifting belt and baggies, right? But he's one of those people that like in his head was Callum for all of his 30s.
Yeah.
But in reality, he's in his 50s now. In reality, he's never not been overweight in his life. He wears a lifting belt at all times to perform heinous exercises. And the reality is he then puts elbow straps on, knee straps on to perform like quarter reps on the leg press with all of the plates. And that guy he's the guy who will tell you, just eat more, son. You've just got to eat a lot more. If you just get on the sausage casserole, plenty of protein, dead cheap to make. And then these are the guys that realistically can't wear a tie and a belt on the same day because they'll turn into sausages. And realistically, not the sort of person I think you need to be taking any form of fitness advice from. So, yeah, that came out of nowhere. But those people
in the bin.
Get in the fucking bin with your sausage casserole diet. I'm not. Imagine the state of these people's cholesterol.
Oh gosh.
That every gym has one though, and they always have. I'm not even going to tell you what we call the guy in our gym. Sarah and I've got a name for him, but they'll have like an apprentice.
Yeah.
Who's some poor bastard in his late teens, early 20s, who knows no better.
Learning from sensei.
A fucking dog who's being literally obliterated in every session with far too much load. Yeah. Cool. In the bin.
Sweet. Cool.
Right, we wrap it up. We'll see you next time for currently undisclosed topic. We'll decide next time. So have a good week. We'll see you all next week.
See you later, team.
Peace.